The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first in this year's series of Joliot Curie webinars. The Joliot Curie Programme is specifically designed to support people who are in the early stages of an academic career, some of whom may be feeling that they're facing barriers to progress. And we hope over the next couple of weeks we've got lots of expert speakers and people who can talk to you from their own experience, and maybe you can draw some strength from what they have to say and also some ideas. Just to say a little bit about why this is called the Joliot Curie Programme, it's named for Irene Joliot Curie, who was the daughter of Nobel Prize winner Marie Curie and a winner in her own right, jointly with her husband Frederick in 1935 for their discovery of artificial radioactivity. And I would say that Irene Joliot Curie is one of the RSC's 175 faces of chemistry, as are both our guests on the webinar panel today. Today we're talking about multiple pathways to success and how diversity is an important thing to bear in mind when we're talking about academic careers. So I'm Julie Franklin, and I'm one of the RSC's careers team, who can provide help and support, which I'll tell you a little bit more about at the end of the broadcast. We can provide help and support for people at any stage in their career, whether they're thinking of an academic career or thinking of going into the commercial sector, and I'll give you contact details to get in touch with us later on. I'm absolutely delighted that we have two more of our 175 faces of chemistry on the panel today. We have Professor David Smith, who is a professor of nanochemistry at the University of York, and Dr Asel Sartbaeva, who is a Royal Society Research Fellow at the University of Bath. So David, would you like to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Julie. As you said, I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of York. I guess I'm a traditional academic in that my role is split between research and teaching and administration. My research is in the area of supramolecular chemistry and nanotechnology. We're very interested in self-assembled materials and systems. I teach a wide range of chemistry, mostly organic and medicinal type chemistry, to our undergraduate students. And then in terms of admin roles that I have, I'm heavily involved in widening participation in universities, and I chair our university's schemes for widening participation, and have been very involved recently in lots of different diversity initiatives and diversity work, both in a university setting and as part of the Royal Society of Chemistry. More about me personally, I have a young family currently, so I've been working part-time previously, and I'm currently working part-time again. I have a husband with some healthcare needs, and I think some of these things are things we might explore later on in the webinar.
Thank you, David. I certainly think those sorts of things are extremely important. So yes, we will return to that. Asel, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Asel. I am, as Julie introduced me, a Royal Society Research Fellow. My fellowship will be coming to an end next year, so I will become a full lecturer at the University of Bath. So in my job today, I am fully funded to do 100%, to devote 100% of my time to research, which in my case, I do mainly into the development of porous materials. So I specifically am interested in the discovery, synthesis, and characterization of a particular class of porous materials called zeolites. Very recently, actually, I also got another idea, and which I've started developing. It's trying to make vaccines thermally stable at room temperature so that we will be able to transport and store them without refrigeration. So in this idea, I use silicon as a material which I apply to the vaccines to make them stable. So as a result of this, developing this new idea, I now have sort of group which works in two directions. One part of my group works on zeolites, and the other one on insilication, as we call this method for the vaccines. In terms of teaching and administration, I don't really do a lot of admin work in the department, but I do some teaching. So I've developed a new course on porous materials. This is an optional course, and I also started recently teaching second year physical and inorganic chemistry. So I am sort of getting more and more into teaching in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. I do quite a lot of outreach work too, as David mentioned. I mainly work with Key Stage 1 pupils, so that's pupils from 4 to about 7, 8-year-olds. And I have very good contacts with local schools where I go quite a lot and perform some experiments. And most recently, I've developed a new film which can be shown to very young children from 3 to 7 approximately, which shows different chemical activities. And I want to develop this further and make more films which teachers would be, I hope, be able to use, and also parents will be able to use to show to their children. Yeah, so that's about me, and I guess I will talk more about different things as we will progress during the webinar.
That's fantastic, and I love the sound of doing the videos for small children. I mean, I know I've done outreach work as well, and it's just very satisfying, isn't it? You know, getting them with young minds that are still open, and getting them fascinated about science at an early age. So fantastic!
Absolutely.
Thank you both for introducing yourself. And I think, you know, our listeners can already hear that there is a diversity of roles just between the two speakers that we have today. So not all academic roles are the same, and I think we can draw some strength from that. Also, I think when we're talking about academic careers, we have in our minds a lot of people have in their minds a traditional route into an academic career. So in other words, you know, achieving a certain amount at a good school, going to certain universities, you know, there tends to be a bit of a kind of an archetype around it. So I'm hoping what we'll be able to do today is maybe sort of explode some of those myths and stereotypes as well, because they can act as barriers for people, and these barriers can be real and quite daunting, really. So can I start with you, Asel? Your route into academia was very interesting. So could you tell us a bit about it and any particular barriers that you experienced along the way?
Sure, of course. So I was born in Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia during the Soviet Union time. So my parents are from very sort of arty background. My father was a designer, sort of an artist. My mother did her degree in history, and a lot of my relatives were sort of from arts backgrounds. So when I said that I wanted to go to the university to study sciences, actually, my whole family were really against it. They really couldn't understand why would I want to do that. So that was a huge barrier for me, actually, because in Kyrgyzstan, the society is still quite traditional. So female role is a very strongly still as someone who doesn't really work, or maybe if works a little bit, but mainly stays in the family. So and the fact that I didn't want to pursue that was quite shocking to my parents, to my relatives, and because the society is so strong there in terms of family links, it was very hard. In any case, I sort of still went against all my family wishes, became almost like a black sheep in the family, I guess. There was also quite a lot of resistance from my friends too, because I think a lot of my friends didn't understand this, because majority of the students' preferences in Kyrgyzstan are to go into law or economics. These are the two most popular subjects. And since I didn't want to go there again, that was really not well understood. Then when I did come to the university, actually, I was the only Kyrgyz woman on my course. It was a Kyrgyz-Russian university. And yeah, that also brought quite a lot of difficulties too. So there were some barriers, but I think one of the things which I really wanted, because I was pretty clear that I wanted to be a scientist, that conviction, I guess, sort of helped me to go through all of this.
So it's having the courage of your own convictions a lot of the time, in the face of a lot of opposition by the sound of it.
Yes, thinking back to that time, actually, I'm now thinking if I did have a mentor at the time, it would have really helped me.
Okay.
On one hand. But yeah, this is just me thinking in hindsight now.
Yes, yeah, no, I was going to bring that subject up really because in the face of all those difficulties and oppositions, I think pressure from family and friends is maybe one of the most powerful things to have to overcome. So, what would you say, Asel, helped you to achieve success? Could you you've already said that you're a very determined person, and that obviously helped you. You had that real desire to do the science. But what else was it? Was there anyone else around you, or anything else that helped you and bolstered you during that difficult time?
I guess one of the things which was really helpful for me was that you see also my family went through a divorce. My parents went through a divorce at the time, so that was just before I was entering the university. So my mom became she was a divorcee, which again in the society at the time was a really sort of not a good position to be in. So a lot of our family sort of stopped even talking to us, and I think that was one of the strongest things which affected me, because my mom then actually was unemployed for several years, but she then actually got a job with UN, and she went from sort of one of the lowest positions, I guess, to a really big international position. And just having her as a role model, seeing how she built her career at quite a late stage, sort of in her age. She only started working in UN when she was sort of in her 40s. I think that was really what made me think that, yeah, I can do this too. But obviously I wanted to do it in science.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really good point, isn't it? A role model can be extremely helpful, and they don't necessarily have to come from the same discipline as you, although I guess they could, somebody who you can look up to and learn from. Mentoring is, of course, a very important thing as well, and the RSC operates a mentoring system, which I'll talk a bit more about later, but that was great. I mean, could you tell us about the most negative experience you encountered really through this trajectory, Asel, and how you felt at the time and what enabled you to get up and get over it again?
It's a funny thing, actually. I was thinking about it earlier. One of my coping strategies is really sort of decouple my emotions from the experience itself. So what I do a lot of the times, when I do have a negative experience, actually, I try to decouple two, and then I deal with them separately. And then what I try to do is I try to flip it in my head that experience is not a negative experience, but it's just an experience. So a lot of the experiences which I think back to myself, I actually class as just an experience. I don't think of it as a negative experience. If you see what I mean.
I do. I think that's very brave, but yes, I do see what you mean.
Yeah. So I think probably for me the hardest time was getting into science. So that initial step to get to the university was one of the hardest, because that's where I had to overcome quite a lot of things. But later on, of course, there are always ups and downs. But as I said, I just try not to think of my experiences as negative in hindsight.
Okay, right. That's a very powerful piece of advice, I think. Thank you, Asel. I'm going to turn to David now. And David, as a senior academic, do you think universities are more aware now of how healthy it is to encourage people from a wide variety of backgrounds into research careers?
I think universities are beginning to change. I think that's still a long work in progress. I think some have changed more than others. I think there is more widely an understanding that having diverse teams of people will achieve potentially better results than having very homogenous teams of people. There's been a tradition in universities of, I guess, appointing people that are rather like the people that are already at the university, kind of try success by thinking success looks like you. And I think that universities have realized that's a bad strategy for for spotting success, and that you're more likely to find success coming from a diverse range of places. So I think that change is beginning. I think there are some policy things that help that along the way. So here in the UK, for certain, where there's been the Athena Swan process, which has really forced universities to put a lot of focus onto the roles of women in science departments. It's now expanded to all departments, and it also is extending beyond just women to begin to think about people from ethnic minority backgrounds and so on. And I think universities that have engaged properly with that process have really thought about the diversity of their staff pools and their postdoc pools and the opportunities that are available for career development for all groups of people at each career stage. But it's by no means a fixed problem in academia. It's something that's going to require continuous work, and there is that unconscious bias that people have that sits underneath a lot of problems, I think.
That's a very interesting observation, and I think sadly it probably is still true. But I mean, it's interesting to know that universities are trying to change, even though that's, you know, some are changing at a faster rate than others. So on the diversity theme, David, could you tell us about some of the success stories that you've seen in your department, maybe, and the benefits you've seen of encouraging talented young people, regardless of their background?
So, I mean, I guess I could pick a couple of examples. One is now quite a senior person. I'll talk about her first, really. So Lucy Carpenter was appointed in 2001 in the department as a young lecturer in atmospheric chemistry, and she was the only one that we had at the time. We had no expertise in atmospheric chemistry in the department, but she was an excellent candidate for a position in physical chemistry and got appointed. And in the years that followed, worked very hard to build the position of atmospheric chemistry in the department. It's now one of the leading centres in atmospheric chemistry in the UK, with about 7 or 8 academic staff members working alongside Lucy. Part of the process there actually was recruiting Lucy's husband, Ali, from another university to come and join the team and be part of the team here alongside Lucy. Okay. And that really helped unlock the Centre of Atmospheric Chemistry. And that was something where the department had to go beyond probably what it had thought it would invest in this area of chemistry to build it up. So there had to be a sort of a calculated gamble taken by the department. Lucy was a sufficiently strong academic that something great could grow, and it has. And one of the really remarkable things, actually, is that for about 12 years of the time she's been growing that atmospheric chemistry centre, she's been working 80% time and bringing up her young family. And as a part-time worker, she last year won the RSC Tilden Award, which, as some of you will know, is the most significant award you can get as a mid-career researcher, somebody sort of in the middle of your academic career. That's the top chemistry award in the UK. So that's a real example of somebody who started out all on their own in a department and has built success sort of through their own energies. I guess if I was going to pick one other example, if that's okay. Of course. We've just appointed to a position, actually, who has talked at webinars like this before about their own journey. I can't really tell too much of their own journey because it's their story to tell, but Avestro is joining us from Durham, and she has a Dorothy Hodgkin Fellowship, which is a Royal Society fellowship scheme that aims to support people who've had non-traditional careers coming through into an academic role. And she's part Filipino, part American, a very interesting upbringing in terms of sort of widening participation and so on. She works hard on conjugated materials and organic electronics and has built her name in making organic materials for battery technologies. But during her PhD, which is normally the time that you'd imagine people are building their career, working flat out hard, that's what the model would say, she struggled with a number of health problems during her PhD and had to take time out during her PhD, work part-time for other parts of her PhD, but has thrived in spite of all those things. And some of those are ongoing issues as well, and come through a postdoc period as well, and is now firmly on the academic track. And her talent, if you ever meet her or see her give a presentation, it's absolutely evident. It shines out of her. There's no reason that her slightly non-traditional pathway would make her any less suitable for an academic career. She's a definite star of the future.
Well, that is the key point, isn't it, really, David? You know, it's the talent that is locked away, you know, from people who maybe not, decided that an academic career wasn't really for them. Clearly, you know, things are changing. I'd just like to ask you a little bit about the sort of policy that you touched on, David. We talked about university policies and the Athena Swan initiative. I'd just like, from your point of view, you know, from your university's point of view at York, you know, what proactive things is York doing to actually encourage greater diversity in research?
Yeah, so there are a number of things that are key, and I think some of them lots of places have, but perhaps in name more than anything. So the first thing, flexible working guarantee, is absolutely key. The idea that you need to flexibly work your hours, that might be working around other things like caring commitments or family commitments, enabling people to do that. So we're able to rearrange lecture times and things like that to fit around our working patterns as best as possible. And then sitting alongside that, because most universities have some sort of flexible working, was a part-time working assurance, which is really powerful, which said to all staff, academic staff in particular, that if you want to work part-time for a period, you can do so. And there's an insurance in the department that when you want to be full-time again, you won't be blocked from doing that by the department. The department won't turn around and say there's no money for you to go back to working full-time. And that assurance meant that people felt a lot more confident about working part-time. There are many people working part-time in this department. We have about 55 academic staff, and more than 10% are working part-time. So it's about 7 or 8 of us currently working part-time. So a couple of men and 5 women, I think, at present, working part-time in the department. And having very visible people doing that and assurances about continuity of role really helps people do that. We've also done things like pay gap analysis at a departmental level, looking at gender pay gaps to see whether certain groups of people are being advantaged or disadvantaged. We also set up a fellowship, which we called our a key fellowship, the Eleanor Dodson Fellowship, which was targeted for somebody rather like a Dorothy Hodgkin Fellowship, but on a local basis. So somebody who needed part-time working or had caring responsibilities or non-traditional career paths and backgrounds. We set up one of those, which will be a rolling fellowship in the department. So there'll always be one person now holding that fellowship. It's an endowed position to lead people into academic roles. And we've done things in other areas. It's not just all been about those areas. We've done a lot as a department about disability in science in particular, and advocating for people with disabilities to succeed in science, and also LGBT plus people working in STEM, giving them reassurance, providing role models, particularly lots of policies around trans people in the workplace that we've developed as well. So it's about building that. And for people at the postdoc level and people in the career building stage, we have a chemical interactions society who get in speakers to talk about the kind of things we're talking about today, career paths and so on, and to network the postdocs and PhDs in the department. They organise social events as well, but it's about engaging people at that career stage in meeting the right people so they can find where their own pathway might lie, I suppose.
Yeah, that's so important. No, that sounds great, David. And I mean, just talking about this is what's happening at York. So I'm sure similar things must be happening in lots of universities. As you say, the sector is changing, albeit, you know, some universities are changing faster than others. So if somebody out there is listening and thinking about universities that they might like to work for in the future, I mean, would all of that information be available on your university's website, for example, David? How would people get hold of that information about diversity policies?
It is for ours. So most British universities now will clearly state their equality approach and policies, and some departments that will be fairly small at the moment, and other departments will have a much more worked up set of policies. Of course, universities have their own diversity policies through the Human Resources Office, but I think these things are important at departmental level. That's where things happen on the ground, is in the department, and it can give you an idea.
Yeah, that's great. Asel, did you want to come in and talk about your university there?
I just wanted to say it sounds fantastic, David, what you're doing at York. It's really good example. I think you're one of the gold. You have Athena Swan Gold, don't you?
That's right, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's on for our renewal, actually. So.
Okay. So we've just put for our silver renewal. Sorry. We had bronze before, but we've just put for silver, and the department here actually is one thing which I definitely can say is incredibly friendly. So one thing which I found when I came to Bath was that how much support I was getting from my colleagues. And that was actually really new for me, and it was really great to see. There's a lot of collaboration, and also what's great to see here is that there's a big number of young academics now, and there are quite a lot of new recruits, and we sort of get together. We go for lunches every day together, and it's a very dynamic department. That's what I really like about it. We also have flexible hours, like in York, but we don't have that many people who do take them. I think we have about 3 or 4 members of staff who actually took some flexible hours. So yeah, we still have sort of ways to improve, I think, to strive towards what you have there in York, David.
Okay, but it sounds like change is afoot, albeit at a different pace in maybe different institutions. But so I guess what you're saying is that if people are interested in a research career and they're maybe doing postdocs at the moment or final year PhD, actually having a look at universities' policies on the website, and if diversity and these sort of flexible working patterns are important to them, to find out which universities actually offer that in such a way as yours do. But of course, getting into a research career is only the beginning. And as we all know, life tends to go on and we all have other responsibilities. So do you think there's a greater understanding of life outside work in academia nowadays? Could you tell us a bit about your own experience of combining an academic career with family life? Could I ask Asel first?
Yes, of course. So I think from my point of view, I do think that we are getting better generally, or all of us, at life and work balance. From my point of view, the difficulty I have, so you see, I have a young family. I have 2 daughters, and my husband is in academia too. So he also works at the University of Bath. So since the birth of our daughters, our life obviously has changed enormously, but one of the difficulties we found both was that a lot of the times we can't juggle conferences because we can't go to conferences together. So we have to choose who will go to a particular conference. And the other thing is, for me personally, I do a lot of experiments outside. So I apply for beam time at neutron sites or synchrotron. So when I go to those experiments, and that's 3 or 4 or 5 days outside, where we're working non-stop 24 hours, which means that when I come back, I'm completely exhausted for several days, so I have to recover. So it sort of takes out about a week or sometimes a couple of weeks of my time around those beam times, which means during those times it's very hard to balance being with the family, obviously. So in a way, actually, in a funny way, it's being an academic is actually helps because we're both in academia, we have very free hours to work, which means that during those times Stephen probably spends more with the family and maybe works a little bit less, but then during other times maybe he would work more. So it's because we have that freedom, we can do that, and that's a good thing, I think, about academia. So in that sense, actually having children for academics in certain sense is a bit easier from my point of view. But I think having 2 academics, having 2 people who are working in academia is a hard thing, especially if the fields are very close. As I said, from the conference point of view, is hard.
Okay, thank you very much. And David, how about you? How do you manage the work-life balance?
Yeah, so that's always interesting. I mean, the good thing is work here, the department's very supportive. So, I mean, from my own perspective, my husband had cystic fibrosis, and so he had a lung transplant in 2011.
Oh, wow.
We knew that might happen at some point, but we didn't know when that would be. And when he got the call for the transplant, that was essentially at least a month away for me, going and staying up at the hospital where he was having the transplant, which was somewhere away from York. So I had to drop everything from work, and work were very flexible about that. And then we went on in 2015 and adopted, and I took quite a lot of time out through the adoption process, and then worked part-time for some period after the adoption. We adopted a little boy, so he's 5 now. Now Sam has some further illness, so he has some rejection of the transplant, so he's not really able to share the childcare anymore. So essentially I have to plan for things like a single parent as an academic, and I have to make sure everything's robust with me able to do everything. And that's very challenging, actually. I'd say being a single parent academic is really tough. You definitely need supportive family around, grandparents, friends who can help out. And that's still something I'm in the process of building up, really. And so that's a challenge. But the great thing about an academic job is that it's super flexible. There's not a lot of hours in work when I absolutely have to be here. I can kind of choose when I need to be here. I can work at home quite easily lots of the time when I'm working on paperwork and things. I can fix time with my student meetings, can all be fixed according to my preferences. And so in terms of combining a role with family, it's pretty good because you can, to a large extent, fix the hours that you want to work. And flexibly work into evenings when the kids are in bed if you need to make up bits that you missed of paperwork and so on, you know. So that really helps. And it's something that I'm kind of very interested in, the dynamics of family roles in particularly the roles of fathers, actually. And I've written quite a bit recently about encouraging the need for fathers to play more active roles in childcare, because I think actually workplaces will change a lot for women as that begins to happen, and families will change a lot for kids as well, hopefully, as if more fathers more naturally played an active role. I think Asa's situation is very nice. I think you do find in lots of academic couples, the parenting does get flexed between the academics because they understand each other's circumstances very well. I think that's less the case where somebody's married to somebody who doesn't work in an academic role, and sometimes there can be less flexibility there. And it can be the academic partner who has the tougher time in a way.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. But it sounds like it's from what you're saying, it is possible to combine both. You know, again, I think that's another barrier that does put people off when they're looking at this, you know, shall I look for an academic career, or is it going to mean that that's it? You know, I can't have any other life and I need to go and find another job. So it's very encouraging to hear you both say that you're maintaining a very active family life, both of you, and combining that with an academic career. I spoke to one very academic at our Joliot Curie conference that we held last year, and she was absolutely upbeat about it, and she said the flexibility is very useful, and of course her daughter had been all over the world, you know, accompanying her to conferences. So I guess we can sum that up by saying it's not all bad news. You know, there is some good in there, and it is possible to do. And I think with attitude,
can I just say, Julie, to reflect on that, I mean, my husband, he wasn't an academic at all, and he worked in, he gave benefits advice to people, and he worked in essentially a call centre at the local council. And his work was totally non-flexible. The call centre was open from 9 till 5, and he had to be there from 9 till 5, and I was the one with the flexibility. So actually, and you know, that's a real benefit of what we do.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. Yes, yeah, and I hope that gives some encouragement to some people listening as well. No, that's an excellent point. Thank you for that. So if we can just move on, I don't want us to run out of time, and we've still got lots of interesting things to talk about. Bearing in mind the people who will be listening to this webinar, maybe they are early postdoc career, maybe they're final year PhD, they're considering, is an academic career the right one for me? I'd just like to know what advice that you both would give to someone who's absolutely passionate about the research they're doing, but is maybe feeling a bit less than confident because of some of those barriers, either real or perceived, that are affecting them at the moment. So, David, if I could ask you, what piece of advice would you pass on? What would that be?
Well, the first thing would be, don't be overwhelmed. It can be very easy to get overwhelmed by what seems like a large task, a big task, break down what you feel you need to do into a series of achievable steps. It might be getting the draft of a paper ready. It might be each step along the way, and celebrate your successes as you have them as well. It's very easy in academia and the pathways to academic careers. There is a lot of rejection potentially along the way. There'll be job applications that people aren't interested in. There'll be grants that you apply for that you don't get. There'll be papers that you feel that are really important that don't get into the journals you wanted to get them into. This will happen to everybody going alongside the same paths as you to try and do the same things as you. So celebrate your successes where you have them. And we all have imposter syndrome all the time. All of us believe we're not good enough to be doing what we're doing, and you will feel like that. But by breaking things down into a series of steps and celebrating successes where you have them, and potentially finding a mentor that's not your boss, it's not the person who's the line manager, it's somebody outside of that who you can share the successes with and also talk about the barriers with, and who can help you find strategies to overcome them. I think that strategy of things and making progress in a stepwise way is the way to break it down.
That's great, and it's good that you mentioned imposter syndrome, because it is one of those things that I think everybody suffers with at some point during their career, but nobody ever really wants to admit to. So I'm glad you broke that taboo, David, and mentioned it. Asa, what would your piece of advice be to someone who is maybe perceiving barriers but absolutely passionate about their research and about their science?
My first advice would be grow your confidence with very small steps, in the same way as David was saying, divide it into small things and sort of celebrate your achievements, but also in the similar way grow your confidence. Every time you have done something, say yourself that yes, you are getting better, you are going to achieve something big. Think of your big aims. Where do you want to be in 20 years, for example? And have that big picture in your mind. Don't get bogged down in detail in the small things. There are always going to be ups and downs, and don't let that dissuade you from your path. Basically, have a big picture in your mind. Okay. Also, find yourself a role model. Find yourself a role model who you can actually look at, and who can help you to overcome those downs actually, and sort of bring you to the ups in the life. Sorry. I hope that's easy to understand what I'm saying.
Yes. I understand what you.
Yes, and as David says, absolutely find a mentor, or find several mentors. Even I always have several mentors who I go to if I need advice. So yeah, that's probably my tips. My main tips.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, both of you. And it's interesting how you both say, it's a mammoth task. It's like the eating the elephant thing, isn't it? You do it one step at a time, or one mouthful at a time, and you celebrate success as you go along. I think that's really good advice from both of you. So thank you for that. And I mean, really talking about getting on and moving your career along, it must be important for individuals to take a proactive approach, not to expect people necessarily to do things for you or advocate for you. It's all about taking control as much as you can, isn't it, really? So what advice what do you think aspiring academics can do to help to get themselves established? Could I ask that to David first?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the one thing just before you get to the academic career, the most important thing in your portfolio that you can work on is your research proposals.
Right.
For me, a department should be appointing somebody because they've shown they can do research and they have really exciting research proposals that are deliverable for that individual. And if your research proposals are not good or not interesting or don't really show that they're deliverable based on your experience, that will be the key barrier in getting a job. I wish that places spent even more time appointing people based on their research proposals and less based on how many papers have they published and where did they publish the papers and what was the impact factor of those journals. Sadly, those things go on.
Yeah.
But I can say with hand on heart that when we recently appointed lecturers here our number one priority was good research proposals. So I'd encourage you to think about that, which sometimes gets overlooked a little bit. And when we appointed last time, we looked at those blind without even seeing the panel of the candidate's track record. We just looked at ideas on paper to come to a judgment of what will this person bring here to York to work with us. And then once we come to a judgment on that, we looked, who are they? Where have they been working? What have they been doing? For us, that transformed appointment process is a good thing, but it meant the candidates needed really good proposals. The other thing I'd add to that is take opportunities that come your way, even if they scare you, and perhaps especially if they scare you. You know, I very early did outreach to a group of 800 A-level students, and that became a really big part of my career and something that I was passionate about and get lots of pleasure about. I went to a sand pit, which is somewhere you can try and get funding and make network meetings with other academics, and I don't like them. In all honesty, I find them really terrifying and scary, but it was a European type sand pit with researchers across Europe, and so much of my research on the back of it is now with that group of people and has been funded by the EU historically. And it came out going into this quite uncomfortable position that's not really me, but good things came out of it. So do take opportunities even if they scare you.
Okay, I know. I think that's a good point too, because sometimes the personal qualities that you need to do things like that are quite different from the personal qualities you need to be a really good researcher. So sometimes you just have to toughen up, don't you, and do those things that do scare you, but nonetheless, you know, they will actually draw people's attention to you, which is what it's all about. Asel, what do you think about being proactive, and what do you think an aspiring academic can do to help get themselves established?
I absolutely agree with what David said. So having good research ideas definitely will be number one priority. I think the second priority, which I would add to what David said, is networking, the importance of networking. And I think David sort of mentioned that too in the second part of what he said. But I just want to add to it. You really need to surround yourself with people who you trust, who you can develop your ideas in a sort of safe and supportive environment. So I'm talking about here networks of peers, of colleagues, also maybe through professional networks, and also not necessarily people who work in the same area as you do. It might be people actually from other areas. So I think the importance of networking is really great. And I personally have done a lot of networking through Royal Society of Chemistry, and have got many new connections through either going to the conferences or being invited to speak at conferences, or applying for grants to do some networking events. So all of those were really, really helpful. And I have to say that a lot of the developing of the ideas which I do happens not just by me sitting in the office, but actually talking to people around me, and then developing those ideas. So that's a really helpful thing. And the other thing, again, which David mentioned, was about challenging yourself. I would definitely say that it's very important to challenge yourself, putting yourself out into really into areas where you might not feel proficient in actually is really good, because it's actually good to feel stupid sometimes in area which you don't know, because you are looking at things from a completely different point of view, and it's actually helpful sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it is mind-broadening, isn't it? So challenge yourself, and also the importance of the people around you, role models, mentors, networking. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the RSC's networks as we wrap the broadcast up. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite people who are listening in. If you have any questions that you would like to ask David or Asel or both of them, if you'd like to start typing them in now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the two of you what you love about your job now and why it was all worth it. And while you're going through that for us and really giving us a motivational moment here, if people would like to start typing in questions, then I can put those to David and Asel when you've finished explaining that. So I'd like to know, what do you love about your job and why was it all worth it? So Asel, can I ask you first? Do type in your questions now while we listen.
I love my job for many reasons. I think the biggest ones for me is, first of all, it's freedom to explore ideas, to develop ideas, to actually see what's possible to do. Think freedom to ask questions really is another one. I love this idea of actually posing new questions and thinking of new things, discover something which is unknown. Also, I have this is something from my childhood, but I always wanted to be able to do something which is going to help people. So with my idea on the vaccine transport without refrigeration, I think I'm sort of adamant that will be something in the future which is going to be incredibly useful to humanity. So that's something which really drives me to continue working. The other aspect of my job, which I absolutely enjoy, is growing new scientists. So working with my PhD students, seeing them develop into sort of rounded scientists who can actually look at new ideas and look at new challenges. So that's something which I take a lot of pleasure from. So yeah, that's probably my biggest drivers. I can talk more about it, but I'll stop for now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have got some questions and comments coming in. So David, if I could ask you about why you love your job, and then we'll look at some of the comments and questions that are coming in.
Yeah, so I think I have always loved the variety of my job in particular. You know, one day I'll be teaching 300 undergraduates about how penicillin works, and the next day I'll be sat with one research student trying to work out how we're going to make our gels more adherent for tissue that we're trying to grow on them for tissue engineering kind of applications. And the variety of experience that you get in this job is remarkable. And the ability to take the research that you do and to bring it to life to audiences that you educate with that research, then either inside the university or outside the university. I also, like Assa, am quite driven by applied research, trying to problem solve. Quite a bit of the research that we do actually looks at medical problems that my husband had, cystic fibrosis, issues with organ rejection, and tries to develop our technologies in a small way to have some impact in those kind of settings. And that's very personally satisfying to think that you're going to work and the technologies that you're developing at the very least might be able to be applied somewhere in the future and make a difference to people. And then just like Asel, really, it's brilliant working with some of the cleverest and most enthusiastic people in the UK, you know, and international as well. My group's massively international. You work with clever people all day who have bright ideas and normally better ideas than me. So probably one of the biggest buzzes of my job is actually when PhDs and postdocs come and knock on my door and they're not wanting me to try and solve a problem that they've got, but they're telling me they've had this cool new idea and is it worth trying in the lab? And that's probably the single most exciting bit of the job, because sometimes what they say as they come through the door is absolutely transformative. And they're kind of the real highlight moments. Occasionally it might be me sitting having that idea in the bath, but it's far more likely that it'll be one of my guys in my team walking through the door and sharing that idea with me. And those are the exciting moments of science.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Right, we've got lots of comments coming in, and we're going to run out of time. I can't read them all, but there are a lot of comments coming. Lots of people agreeing with what you're both saying, particularly agreeing with it being difficult or a particular challenge to organise work-life balance. Quite a few people commenting on, you know, what can we do to encourage more girls and women to take up careers in science research. So I can only say, yes, I agree with all that. I'm sure you do. I will explain what the RSC might be able to help a little bit further on. There's just a couple of questions here. Now, here's an interesting one that's come in. I don't know who'd like to answer this one. I would like to know how easy or hard it is to negotiate a salary in academia. Who'd like to take that one? Because I guess we all need money to live, however brilliant we are.
I'm happy to go first on that.
Okay, over to you then.
So one thing that I mean, in the UK at least, typically appointment is made onto an academic scale, okay, and there is a salary scale. And so the normal understanding is then, depending on your experience, you'll sit somewhere on that salary scale. And the more experience you've had, then the further up that salary scale you'll sit. But you're not normally negotiating a free-floating salary out of the thin air in the UK. Now, that may be different elsewhere in the world. I don't know how salary negotiations work in the US, for example. One thing I would advise is, it is a negotiable thing, although they'll always try and put you at the bottom of the scale in the UK and say, this is where you should start because you're a new academic, so we'll start you at the bottom. If you do have very significant experience and you've worked in positions that are, you know, extensive, and you've gained perhaps more experience than some academics might have, do negotiate where you should be on the scale. There's lots of evidence that shows that women in particular won't negotiate over that first discussion. And the very least you can do is say, well, I've got this experience, and this experience. So why am I at point 1 on the scale? Shouldn't it be a little bit higher up than that? And to see what the university come back with. But I think there's often a view that what you're offered is not really negotiable in the UK, and you're just lucky to get a job, so you take it, fundamentally. But if you've got experience, do ask whether they really feel the salary is appropriate, because sometimes they then come back with a discussion. Okay,
that's great. Asil, would you like to add anything to that?
Actually, I've learned something myself. Yeah, I've never negotiated a salary in my life, so I have very little experience, and I think I can concur there that women don't do that often enough. So I'm gonna actually try and learn to do this, and probably in the future, yes, I will try and negotiate following David's advice.
Okay, well, that's good to know that the knowledge is going all ways here on this discussion today. I think it's been really valuable. There's another interesting comment and question that's come in here. Hello all, you talked earlier about imposter syndrome, and how do you deal with it being from a minority background, so that's non-British born and LGBT plus, and keeping creativity going at the same time? Who would like to tackle that one?
If you want, I can start on that. Yeah.
Yes.
So I sort of about 3 or 4 years ago, I started thinking about it, and I've realized that I'm disadvantaged sort of 3 times, being a minority, being young, and being female. So triply disadvantaged, I'm now calling it, basically.
Okay.
So I've actually, one thing which I was thinking back to my experiences is I have met quite a lot of times where people really put me down because of the either being a minority or a woman, or a young researcher. But a lot of the times I just never really paid attention to it. So that was probably my coping strategy with it, which might not be the best strategy, to be honest, because I'm now much more sensitive to these issues, and I'm finding it actually, I'm starting to see it everywhere. I did have an experience once where I actually went to see an academic, a senior academic, a professor at the university, and he didn't even hide the fact that he was disappointed at seeing me there, basically, because he was expecting a male, much older academic and non-minority, and I could see that all of that on his face. He just didn't even hide it. So I think that's probably when I started noticing all of this much more. And the coping strategy of me was always just not to pay attention to it and just brush it off and continue. and this might not have been the best strategy. Yeah, I'm still learning how to cope with it myself, I guess.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's a journey, isn't it? Yes, thank you for that. David, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think in terms of imposter syndrome, in particular, that the sort of feeling of inadequacy when really you're just as good as anybody else. The secret there is your peers, the people that you surround yourself with at your level, and to have good friends and people that you trust that are on the career path with you. It may be group mates that you've worked with, it may be people that you met at a conference who you really got on with, but having a group of people who you can sit down and be really honest about how you're feeling and what the job's like and what barriers you've been facing. And olden days academia was a boys' club, like an old boys' club, and this was a problem. But one of the reasons it evolved like that is I think those groups of men, primarily white senior men, had gone through their careers together and they'd had those discussions with each other, the problems they were facing, the barriers they were facing, and they became quite a tight group that could then sadly control science. But if you have your own peer group that's going to stand by you and understand you and support you and just say, we all feel like that, or I had this thing the other week where such and such happened. At the very least, you've got a sounding board. You realize you're not alone. And those are the people that as you go through the career, some of those will be left with you as you go up through the career. They'll be your great friends when you're in your 50s and your 60s doing the academic job. And hopefully you won't be an old boys club, but you'll still be supporting each other at that stage of your career. I'm still in contact with lab mates that I had back in my days doing research, and it's still part of my support network.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There are more questions coming in now, but I'm afraid we are going to run out of time. So what I'm going to do is to just move on to, we've heard about the support and help from other people that can be really valuable during this journey. And I would just like to say I'm one of the RSC careers team, and we are there to support members at any career stage anywhere in the world. So if you have a look at the web link that's there at the moment, which is www.rsc.org/careers, you can find all sorts of information there online at your own pace, in your own time, which could be helpful to you if, as I'm sure you've been inspired by what our speakers have had today. We can offer career consultations for people who are AMRSCs. We can offer individual guidance and career reviews for MRSCs and FRSCs. And also, really, really importantly, I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that we have got a mentoring scheme. David was quite right earlier when he said a mentor shouldn't be your line manager or anyone who's got a vested interest in your success. We do offer a mentoring scheme which is entirely independent. All our mentors are trained members of the RSC, and they can sometimes give you some very valuable perspectives on your career and on yourself, and help you make the right decisions. So if you go to that link that's on the page now, the careers link, you will find information about mentoring and a link by which you can find out more information. So if the whole thing about mentoring you think will be helpful to you, it clearly has been helpful to both our speakers today, that is something that we might be able to offer you to help. There are lots of other things that we can do. I'd particularly like to draw your attention to our networks, which Asel mentioned the importance of networking. I always say to people, if you're a member of the RSC, you're already a member of a network of something like 52,000 people. It might even be more than that now, but a lot of people anyway, arranged into divisions and interest groups. And as part of your membership package, you can join a certain number of those. I would encourage you to have a look on our website. The link is there, and make sure that you're getting your money's worth out of us. These networks, who knows who you might meet, who you might be able to help, and who might be able to help you. We do have a specific early career network that might be useful if you're, coming to the end of a PhD or in your first or second postdoc. That can help you. We've got online professional development resources that can help you. And we've also got a database of approved training courses if you're thinking that transferable skills or maybe some more practical skills could do with brushing up. And then, of course, there are other sources of support outside. I would point you to VTI, a very useful organisation who can help an awful lot with professional and career development for researchers. So do go onto their website if you haven't already been there and see what they have to offer to help you manage and progress your own career on your terms rather than thinking it's all down to everybody else. I expect you know all of those other sources of support. They're all job sites mainly, but a lot of them do actually have interesting articles and interesting links that might help you with the career management and the career development, as well as finding a new position. So I think really we have run out of time now. So I would just like to thank you all very, very much for listening. And I would particularly like to thank our two guests today. So that's Professor David and Dr. Asel, who have given us some fascinating insights into their own careers, which have been really, really helpful for us. So I'd just like to say thank you very much. I don't know whether you two would like to say goodbye to our listeners as well.
Yes, I'll go first. I'd just say thanks for listening. And if you have any other questions, you can always use Twitter with the hashtag Joliot Curie 2018, Joliot, Joliot, Curie 2018, all one word. And I'll try and answer anything that you put up on there if you've got any specific questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, David. And Asel? Are you still there? I think Asel may have left. Oh,
Hello.
No, are you still there?
No, I'm here. Yes, sorry, I just muted it and I forgot. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please do write to me. I'll be happy to help. I'm happy to mentor people if they need any advice.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Bye. Right, okay, well, I think we have run out of time now, so thank you both very much. I hope it's been inspiring for the people who've been listening today, and I'd like to wish you all the very best in your own career, whatever path that takes. So thank you for listening, and goodbye for now.